May we be so fashioned by your grace that we become a dwelling pleasing to you. You may not remember hearing that. When I go to church, I normally don't pay any attention to the prayers and the different things that are said, but that was part of our opening prayer today. May we be so fashioned by your grace that we become a dwelling pleasing to you. And it is easy for us to think about that as an individual statement, that this becomes a dwelling pleasing to God. And we know that it also is clearly a reference to the church writ large. All of us collectively here in this parish and as the Archdiocese and as the Catholic Church in the world, that we become a dwelling place, the place that God inhabits, so pleasing to him in our world. But today we gather with so many of you who began your married life in this place, and we celebrate that, and we celebrate that commitment you made, and we celebrate that what you did on that day when you exchanged vows, when you created the being which is your marriage. You were saying these very words. May we be so fashioned by your grace, O Lord, that our family becomes a dwelling place that is pleasing to you. They are powerful words. And today we gather in this place to celebrate that commitment some of you made 20, 30, 40, 50 or more years ago and are still living out. And you know better than anyone that it isn't always easy. It's to be celebrated, and it's to be loved, and it's to think about all the positive things that have come about because of it, children and grandchildren, and even things that have happened within you. But we also know it's a journey with someone else, and that makes it all the more challenging at times. I distinctly recall now, some probably 17, 18 years ago, I got a phone call from my dad. And I was living in Oregon, he was in Florida, 3,000 miles away, and he was laughing, and I thought, oh goodness, what did he do this time? And he was like, you'll never believe. And I don't know what made me say it. I said, were you on a ladder? Now, if you knew my 83-year-old father at that time, who was born with a bad arm and a bad leg, the one thing he should never have done any time in life was get on a ladder. And he said, who told you? I said, what were you doing? He said, well, Mom needed a box down from the shelf in the garage. And I was thinking, two of you. One of you in good shape, one of you with good balance. Yeah, don't send her up the ladder. But that is, to me, emblematic of my parents' relationship, that there was nothing my dad wouldn't have done to try to make my mother's life a little easier. Now, there's another story that I tell, and I told earlier, about at my mother's wake service, now some 10 years ago. And my dad was in a wheelchair next to her coffin, and a man came up and said, Ray, really sorry for your loss. And he said, my father next to his beloved wife, yes, 47 of the best years of my life. The man walked away, and I said, Dad, you were married 61 years. And he said, don't I know it? But if he were being in a more honest stage, that was just a joke, but any difficulty really wasn't her fault, at least in the early years. But when we gather with people who are celebrating memories, it's not as if they completely forget the difficult moments or the hard moments, but we do recognize that when we look at those beautiful pictures on our walls out there and see all those bright, shining faces, most of them young, and then see in a few minutes a somewhat older figure standing next to them, Sometimes the man or woman would say to themselves, gosh, I used to be so beautiful, or I used to be so handsome. But to look at the beauty etched on an older face, to see in the hands of someone who has worked hard to support his family, to see in the knuckles of someone who's kneaded bread or taken care of laundry for decades, there's a different kind of beauty that is etched in the wrinkles. And we celebrate that. For a husband and wife journeying the road of life together create a oneness and a unity, which is completely different than any other commitment. It is the fundamental, sacramental, vocational commitment of the vast majority of Catholics and Christians. But it is not always easy, and it is to be celebrated. For it is in that journey, it is in nurturing and caring for one another, in offering forgiveness when necessary, when picking each other up through difficult times and celebrating with each other in good times, that you begin to see two people becoming the one that they said yes to. And that is the gift each and every one of you offer to our world. Not the perfection of your marriage, but your marriage itself, which is perfected in the love of Christ. And that your children and grandchildren, that your neighbors and friends come to a fuller sense of God's love for each one of us, and seeing the way you care for and cherish each other and your families. In our gospel today, we hear Jesus, or see Jesus, curing a leper, somebody who has been cast out of the community, someone who cannot come close to the rest of his society for fear of contagion. And he kneels before Jesus and pleads, "If you want to, you can cure me." Important words for us to hear as members of the body of Christ. Important words for us to reflect on as men and women who have spent their lives married and giving. Is this base sense that pours forth from Jesus, of course I want to. And he reaches out and touches the untouchable. He reaches out and breaks all the barriers that divide him and this person who is sick. He reaches out and makes them whole. That is the mission of the church in our world, and we can list any number of social and moral and political ills that need to be overcome. But it is this base instinct that we see so often in married people. Of course I want you better. Of course I want what is good for you. Of course I will do what I can do to make your life more complete. It is in marriage that we see the clearest sign, the clearest symbol of the depth of God's love for all of us. And today we celebrate that in you.